Hi there, this is Dr. Kingston, and in this video we're going to be discussing the integument, and we'll get a nice little introduction to what we're looking at here. So our learning objective here is to discuss the very basic structure and functions of the integument. We'll talk about the three layers that make the integument up, and we'll talk a little bit about how the structure and contents differ between each layer. Alright, so we'll get a nice starter introduction here. Okay, so when we're talking about the integument, we are talking about three layers of tissue. The outer two, so the epidermis and dermis, make up what we consider to be the skin, and then the hypodermis is what we talk about often as the subcutaneous layer. Alright, so the epidermis is the outermost of these, and this is a layer of epithelium. Okay, so same type of epithelium that we've talked about in different contexts throughout the course here. What separates this from some of those other epithelia is that this one is made up of mostly dead keratin-filled cells. So keratin is a very tough protein. As these cells grow and then die off, the space inside the cell fills up with keratin, so they become very scaly and relatively hard. Okay, because of this, the epidermis is avascular. So if we look down here in the pink area here, this is the dermis. We can see some of those blood vessels. Note that they are not coming up into the epidermis. So this is how those cells actually end up dying off as they come up. They lose their blood supply and fill with keratin that way. Alright, so down in this pink dermis area again, where I just showed you, we have our living cells that make up the skin. Okay, and that is because this region is vascularized. The tissue here is a dense, irregular connective tissue. So if you think back to that very first lecture, it's a specific kind of connective tissue. And this is where we see many of the different structures that are not technically part of the skin but are embedded in the skin make their home. So this is where we see hair follicles here. This is where we see some glands. Okay, and that's because this is a relatively stable area with stable blood supply. Deep to everything else here then, we have the hypodermis or the subcutaneous layer, which is a layer of loose connective tissue. And just like the dermis, this is a relatively stable area. It has its own vascularization, and it has its own nerve supply. Okay, this is made up of a lot of adipose tissue for the most part. So we store a lot of fat in our skin, so I just circled a couple of those cells there for you. And the other tissue here is really an areolar connective tissue. Okay, so not too dense. If you tug on your skin or kind of rub your hands over it, you'll notice that it slides over the muscle tissue underneath pretty easily. And that is because we have this nice loose connective tissue layer here. Alright, some of the structures that I mentioned that are sitting within the epidermis. The three big categories here we'll go over. The first is the pilosebaceous apparatus. Now, when you see pilo or pili, we're talking about hair. So this is going to be made up of the hair follicles. So the follicle is this little sheath here that makes a little pocket for the hair to grow in. Okay, we can see another one over here, kind of dissected away. These allow the hair to grow from deeper down in the dermis. They're a little extension of the epidermis that comes down here, by the way, but we'll go into more detail on that in a different video. So they allow the hair to grow, and they have a couple of different things that attach to it. So the first are these erector pili muscles, and I'm going to circle that one right there, erector pili. It does exactly what its name suggests. So pili means hair, erector means it makes it stand erect. So that is what we see when we get goosebumps and all the little hairs stand up on end. This is a little smooth muscle, and we will talk about that in greater depth in the hair video. The other thing that we've got here are some sebaceous oil glands, and these typically will empty directly onto the shaft of the hair into the hair follicle here as they fill up. So this is what makes your hair kind of manky and funky when you don't wash it for a few days. All right, other structures that we find embedded here we have sweat glands or sudoriferous glands. I find sudoriferous very, very difficult to say, so I will probably call them sweat glands. But either one is correct. You may use either. And these are typically depicted in these pictures as these twisty spiral looking structures here. Okay, and these are long coiled glands like this when you look at them under a microscope. That is why they're always depicted this way instead of as like a big bulb or something. Okay, so these are producing watery sweat. And then the last accessory structure is not actually pictured on here, but it's something you're all very familiar with. And this is ungulae, or our nails. Ungulae is a catch-all term, or it's an umbrella term, however you want to think about it. It's going to refer to nails, claws, and hooves. So specifically to humans, we have nails on our fingers and toes, so we will talk about those as well. All right, the last thing I want to just touch on here in this introduction is the functions of our integumentary system and its accessory structures here. So despite being one of our shorter units here, and despite whatever preconceptions you might have, because you look at your skin every day and I'm sure you think it's kind of boring, right? But it's doing a lot of important things for us. So it is really heavily involved in regulation activities. So thermoregulation is the big one. It acts as an insulator for our deeper structures. So that means both preventing heat loss and preventing overheating. Okay, so it keeps our temperature in a stable range. It is involved in excretion and absorption. And this might sound a little counterintuitive. The excretion really comes from those sweat glands that we saw on the last slide. So those will excrete waste in addition to sweat. And some water can be absorbed through the skin. All right. Vitamin D synthesis is not super obvious just from looking at the anatomy that I've showed you so far. This is by and large a biochemical process, but I think we're all pretty familiar at this stage in our life with vitamin D's role in maintaining a healthy body, and that we had to go outside and be exposed to the sun for it to be synthesized in our body, and that is done beginning with structures in the skin. We'll talk about that in a little bit here too. All right, and finally here in regulation, we have a massive energy store within the integumentary system just from all of the adipose that's stored in the subcutaneous layer. Okay, that hypodermis layer, subcutaneous, you can pinch this on yourself, you can pinch this on a friend. We all store a decent amount of adipose here, okay, so our body can then call on that when we need extra energy. All right, so moving down this way here then, the sensory roles the integument plays are also important. So with the integument being the external most aspect of the body, it is what we use to interact with our environment most of all. Therefore, we need a signaling mechanism that allows our brain to adjust what we're doing so that we don't injure our body. So we have a lot of tactile means of perception here, as well as different receptors for different temperatures. All right, and finally, the things that we are protecting ourselves from, here we go. The integument is going to provide a relatively sturdy layer to protect us against abrasion and friction from everyday wear and tear. It is a barrier against infection, so it's keeping different pathogens out. It plays a role in shock absorption, which is not necessarily, you banging your elbow on something. This here, I'm specifically talking about the fat pads that we have in our hands and feet. So those play a big role in diffusing the shock when we take a step. It protects us against UV rays. While I'm sure we have all rolled our eyes at some point about the sun being a deadly laser, it's actually true. So true to some extent. So the integument here plays a role in protecting our deeper structures from UV rays. And it also provides a permeability barrier which serves to keep our wet stuff wet and our dry stuff dry. Okay, so it keeps our fluids inside and prevents them from being lost to the surrounding atmosphere. All right, so those are our functions, and that is going to bring us to the end. So I will see you in the next video. Thank you.